far as the video. Okay, but all right. So Nathaniel Hawthorne, we're going to look at him real quick. I don't want to take a lot of time because I do know that reading it takes about 35 minutes. The Minister's Black Veil. I wanted you guys to be able to read it first and kind of form an opinion about Nathaniel Hawthorne before I started talking about him. But I'm going to go ahead and just talk about him. So if you were to click on that link, like I just did, you would only see this here. It's not an assignment. It's just you have to read it. We previously looked at a short story, which is a parable by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Remember what a parable was? Parable is, it teaches a moral lesson. It's a story that teaches a moral lesson. So he purposely tells us that this story is going to be a parable. I purposely did not tell you Nathaniel Hawthorne's history, but simply asked what you might think how he thought about Puritans. So that was part of what the whole thing. I'll ask you again later after the story, what do you think he thought about Puritans? I probably would, I'll probably anyway end up saying something. He is related to Puritans. I'm not going to say that he is a Puritan, but he was born in 1804. So obviously he was not around in the 1600s or something like that, but he does come, his background comes from that Calvinistic Puritan background. So 1804 was when he was born, 1864, and you can probably click on the link and you can actually see what I'm looking at as a PDF, and I'm putting it up on the screen for us. There we go. Nathaniel Hawthorne. This is from our textbook. So I just found it really interesting how they led off in our textbook, because when I started reading Hawthorne, like the Scarlet Letter and other stuff in school, I never knew that. I just wouldn't write this. Nathaniel Hawthorne was an unusually handsome man with a loving and beloved wife. By midlife, he had earned recognition as a writer and won the admiration of his contemporaries. Now, that part I would believe. Like, hey, okay, we could write, but why would you talk about someone as far as unusually handsome? Unusually handsome. So how does that play into perspective? So we look at perspectives of authors and the things and their upbringing. I look at the history that surrounds them. So we're looking at, he's in his teen years by 1820. He'll be 14. Is that right? 14, 10. Yeah, well, he'll be 16, right, in 1820. So he's writing in 1820 what's going on. This is pre-Civil War stuff. He died during the Civil War. He did not die from the war, but he died in 1864. So it's important to note. I will say that he died a very lonely man, which I find very interesting, and that's in the text too, but that's at the end of the text. So he became increasingly dissatisfied, remote, and disappointing to his friends. He wasn't disappointed in his friends. He was a disappointment because I guess his remoteness. He chose this remote life. It was as if his dark insights into the human heart had cast gloom into his own. All right, so his fiction, which has survived the changing times of many generations, is more admired today than when it was written. So I find this all interesting. I'm reading it kind of word for word for you just because this is a very remarkable man, very successful man, and this is the little history that we have from him. Does it change our perceptions about him knowing that he writes dark things? Does it cast gloom when we read? You're probably not getting excited now about reading The Minister's Black Veil when you're going, oh, this is going to be a gloomy tale. So, but there's a little bit of all of us in this. I asked you to write about a secret yesterday, and so think back on that. If your secret were told or were found out, discovered, even if you didn't have one, you made one up. Think about how your psyche would handle that. All right, so the source of the darkness is thought to lie in Hawthorne's illustrious ancestors. William Hawthorne, serious soldier and judge, came to Massachusetts in 1630. So here we go with the Puritan stuff. Hawthorne describes him in a preamble to the Scarlet Letter as bearded, sable-cloaked, and steeple-crowned progenitor. William Hawthorne's son, John, was also a judge. So he comes from a very educated background. But here's just what I find disturbing. William Hawthorne's son John was also a judge. During the Salem witch trials of 1692, he played a minor role in sentencing 19 of the accused to death. And if you're familiar with that history, they were obviously innocent of this witchcraft. So it's just a dark time in our history. So, and he's related to that in a way. Anyway, on the second page, returning to Salem, Hawthorne set himself up in what he called the dismal chamber, a room on the third floor of the family house. He kept himself a virtual prisoner there for the next 12 years. Found that interesting too. And I'm just scanning through. So he became reclusive. And so when you're reclusive, you're alone with your thoughts. You don't have many friends. I mean, isn't it any wonder how his text could become so discouraging? All right. So over the next few years, Hawthorne courted and became engaged. So he did have some interest there. To Sophia Peabody. He briefly joined the utopian experiment in communal living at Brook Farm. Neither the shoveling of manure nor the endless, lofty discussions of the transcendentalists appealed to him. After the marriage in 42, the Hawthornes moved to the old manse in Concord, where Emerson had lived before them. Ralph Waldo Emerson, alone in these woods. But no warm friendship resulted from these meetings. He talked with Thoreau and Emerson, but no friendship. Near the end, Hawthorne was unable to complete several fictional copies or projects that he promised to his publisher, and he died May 18th, 1864 while on a trip to Pierce. Hawthorne died in a New Hampshire hotel room. So he died alone. That's what I meant. He died alone. So he was a very, very interesting fellow, and so it's kind of interesting to know that little bit of history about him and about his aloneness as he writes these other things. And plus, even the Salem witch trials. The Scarlet Letter, what he's really known for, that novel, he writes about adultery with this woman who is a settler. She's Puritan in nature, and she has a child out of wedlock. And it's a very interesting story, very long story as far as the detail. But in it, he kind of makes fun of the Puritans. I wouldn't call it making fun of them, but some of the things that they absolutely believe in, he does, but he recognizes something else, and maybe some of man's own fallacies by setting up these laws that, can they even measure up to them, which is pretty interesting. The champion of the story, Hester Pine, is I wouldn't say vindicated, but she raises the girl. It ends up being the minister who she had the affair with, and that's the child's father. And he has demons associated with, not true demons, but he has his regrets. I mean, it's just a fantastic story, but in it he's really poking fun at some of the harshness of the concepts that the Puritans came up with. So anyway. I'm going to go ahead and stop this video. I want you to read Minister's Black Veil. We'll go over questions tomorrow, and we'll go from there.